John Wayne our way out of this thing. We're hoping that these CSAR forces come in and rescue us. I mean, the motto of our pararescue force is so that others may live. Seeing the videos that you're showing right now of that HC-130 and then the H-860 Pavehawks down there at low altitude in the weeds, hunting for that downed air crew, just makes my heart smile. When we lose a crew member in combat, everything stops. These combat search and rescue folks, this is their Super Bowl. They train years for this, and for the past 30 days, knock on wood, that alarm hasn't sounded. They've been sitting there playing cards on the alert runway, and then when the alarm sounded, they sprung into action. And this is a well-oiled machine that has been thoroughly planned out, and they're executing to it right now.
And they're doing this in a part of Iran. Again, Iran is a massive country with really diverse.
And then when the alarm sounded, they sprung into action. And this is a well-oiled machine that has been Well, Victor, it's a lot more complex. I've seen a lot of folks wondering, well, if they ejected together, the front and the back seater in an F-15E go within 0.3 seconds of each other, they explode out of the cockpit. How can they not land near each other? Well, if you've seen in some of these videos, it's pretty mountainous. It's pretty rocky and it's pretty rugged terrain. So you might be close in distance, but a world apart. But this is what we train for. And Victor, a big majority of a brief as a fighter pilot before we went over bad guy country was search and rescue. Hey, if somebody goes down and you see it, you assume on-scene commander. You launch the search and rescue effort. So we've thought through this a lot, and it's good to see the Air Force pararescue folks executing this, some of the most elite forces on this planet.
Matthew Wiz Buckley, thank you so much for setting the table for us. With me now, CNN military analyst, retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Layton, and lead global security analyst for the Washington Post, Josh Rogan. Gentlemen, good evening to both of you. 12 hours now into this search, Colonel. What's your top concern today?
Well, survival for the remaining crew member, Victor, because, as Wiz was talking about there in his interview with you, it's really important to rescue these people as quickly as possible, because the longer that they are out there, the greater the risk is that they're going to be captured by either a farmer that's out there in a field that sees them, or some policeman, or a member of the military. So there's a big risk that the evasion part of this operation is going to be much harder to achieve the longer the stakes. So the quicker they can get them out, the better in a situation like this. Of course, they have to worry about things like weather, and they have to worry about other threats coming in. And the longer that lasts, this time interval lasts, the more likely it is that the Iranians will gather forces that will try to surround an area where they think that crew member is. And they may be right, they may be wrong, but the risk is higher.
I listed off the U.S. aircraft that have been attacked by the Iranians and played what the administration said about completely uncontested skies over Iran. Clear the air on the capabilities of the Iranians at this point in the war.
So the Iranians have probably about 50% of their missiles remaining. That doesn't mean that they can launch all of those. So before the war, we talked somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 missiles that they had. Some of those are going to be surface-to-air missiles. Those surface-to-air missiles are the ones that you have to worry about from an air dominance or air superiority perspective. When the administration talks about air dominance, that would mean that we basically have total control of the skies, and there is almost no threat that can actually penetrate the air screen that we would have over that territory. We do have air superiority, but air superiority does not mean that you have complete control over the skies. It means that there are still pockets of basically resistance, if you will, against us. And there also are elements of the Iranian military and the IRGC that can shoot at our aircraft, and they will do so maybe not with the types of signatures that we're expecting. We expect a lot of our whole protective gear is geared to radar and being able to pick up radar signatures. A lot of what they have is heat-seeking or even just visuals. So there could be one guy with a manpad that's out there and can fire that missile because he sees that aircraft.
Josh, what is the threat of, or the consequence of just the bellicosity of what we're hearing from Secretary Hegseth and from the president when clearly that was undermined by what we saw today.
Right. Well, today's attacks have laid bare the obvious fact that the President of the United States and the Secretary of Defense are either unaware or misleading the American people about the vulnerability of U.S. air assets in the Iran war. And they said, the President of the United States said very clearly that they couldn't do this, and then they did it. So that calls into question his own credibility and the strategic credibility of the United States. And because that premise is what they're basing their theory of the case on. In other words, if that's not right, well, then their whole theory that Iran is weak, that Iran is ready to negotiate, that this provides a path to end the war anytime soon, is also based on a false assumption. And now the entire world can see it. So we've had about 4 weeks of the administration telling us everything's fine, everything's going according to plan. And now everyone can see with their eyes that that's obviously not the case. So now we're back to square one. How do we get out of this? And the president is facing a choice. He can either de-escalate or he can double down. He can either admit that the original theory of the case, which was that you could bomb Iran into submission and they're just going to fold and give Trump everything he wants, is not true. Or he can say, oh, screw us, screw you, and send in ground troops and escalate this thing even further. Neither of those are good options. But the status quo, which is that Trump claimed on national television just a day ago that everything's going great, this is going to wrap up very soon, is obviously not true. It can no longer be sustained as a credible expression of U.S. policy or strategy in any way.
And so let's talk about this taunting from the Speaker of the Iranian parliament, one of the persons that reportedly the president was talking with that he thought was in a position to give him what he wants, to be on the other side of an enforceable deal. And based on what I read, what's your read on that?
Right. It's clear, again, that the presentation that the Trump administration gave us, which is that there are these moderates that they're engaging with who are going to make a deal and fracture against the IRGC, is just not based in any actual reality or the facts on the ground. And the Iranians are being very clear about that. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that obviously that the negotiation is not going to end anytime soon. The talks in Pakistan are not going well. The Iranians are not going to join them. We're going to have to come up with another plan. That's going to take a lot of time. The sides are really far apart. And the whole idea that you're going to find some sort of Delcy Rodriguez type figure who's going to make a deal with the Trump administration to hand over Iran's interests and its oil and its sovereignty to Trump to do whatever he wants with is obviously not true at this point. And so it makes it very hard for anyone, including Republicans in the Senate, by the way, who've been coming out today very strongly against more funding for this war, to back the president's claim that everything's going great. Obviously, everything's not going great.
Colonel, let me ask you to fit this Russian piece of the puzzle in, because we don't know if what happened today has anything to do with the Russians, but the president has acknowledged that he knows that the Russians are supporting the Iranians with intel. How should that shape people's expectation or understanding of what the Iranians could be capable of in week 6 and 7 and 8 if it goes on?
Yeah, Victor, that's a great question, because what it really means is that the Iranians become much more capable. They do have some indigenous capabilities. They have a very robust intelligence service that has been active for decades, really. And one of their key targets is, oh, by the way, the United States. So they do understand how we fight wars. They observed us in Iraq very carefully. They observed us in Afghanistan very carefully, both the western side of their country and on the eastern side of their country. So when it comes to the Russians, it is pretty clear that the Russians have provided them with key support. Some of it is tactical intelligence. For example, the strike on Prince Sultan Air Base, where the AWACS was hit and a couple of refuelers were hit. That was basically based on very precise intelligence coordinates that they may not have been able to get otherwise. What they're doing now may or may not be based on the Russians, but they have clearly developed tactics and techniques that could have been gleaned from the Russians and their experiences in Ukraine. So there is a clear coordination that is going on between the Russians and the Iranians that even predates this war that we have with them. And I think that's only been furthered, that cooperation between both Russia and Iran. And we can see that in the way they're acting and in how they're employing their forces.
All right, Colonel Josh, thank you both. Next.